Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ginger Hacker here. And today for our part 12 of Breaking into Cyber, I am very happy to say I have a great colleague of mine I've gotten to meet and get to know the last few months here while I'm currently at my Warrant Officer Basic course. His name is Luke. He is a strategic information engineer currently in the DoD field. And Luke, I'm going to pass over to you real fast to say a quick hello and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, name's Luke Johnson. I am like I said here at the Warrant Officer Basic course for cyber operations. I've been in cyber for about 7.5 years now, and really excited to be here, ready to dig into this stuff with everybody and share my journey.
Awesome. Well, with everyone that knows here on the Ginger Hacker site, we have 5 questions we ask all of our individuals we get onto the channel, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So, Luke, if you can, could you share your journey into cybersecurity and kind of what initially sparked your interest in this career?
Yeah, so it's a weird one. I kind of got into cyber kind of later in life. I had been in the military for 10 years, just about 10 years, as a helicopter mechanic and flight engineer on Chinooks,
Oh
and
man.
I ended that. Yeah, it was wild. Grew up around aviation. My dad was a pilot, and um, so but I started my career working on AH-64 Apaches, and did a lot with the weapon systems, the armament systems, and so a lot of the troubleshooting that we did dealt with digging into the binary of the very basic computer systems, and of course, obviously, I'm also a gamer, so started building computers, when I was in my early to mid 20s, and that's where I think the seed was planted. So I got out of the army and was out for about 8 years. Got a degree in. Again, you're going to see a very odd transition into this career field. Um, got a degree in got a degree in music theory and composition because I've been a musician for most of my life, and taught for a while. Was teaching music and playing, doing performances, playing in rock bands and stuff. And that was not as lucrative a career as I was hoping it would be.
Okay. Okay.
and so my wife and I had a conversation, and I was 37 at the time, and was looking to do a career change, and the National Guard, which is where I was at before I had separated from the military, was a really good option. And I was like, oh, IT, that's a really good field. It's fun. I like computers, and have dealt with some computer systems on helicopters and commo and stuff. So I got in as just as an IT specialist. And after about 6 months of that, I got the opportunity to go work for Army Cyber Command up in North Virginia, doing vulnerability assessments. And at the time, I had no idea really what that entailed. I mean, I kind of had a general idea of, defensive stuff and setting up, proper configuration and compliance, and all of those buzzwords that you hear.
Yeah.
And so I went up there and got into it, and got trained up on the process that we were going to be doing, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Got really involved. I learned a lot about RMF and policy and compliance enforcement, and so it just kind of snowballed from there. I was a baby in the field, and got really lucky to meet some other guys that were kind of in the same boat as myself, and we got mentored by a few senior guys in the Guard that were really invested in our success,
That's awesome.
and
That's always
so
good.
they yeah, they took a lot of they made a lot of headway in getting us enrolled in boot camps and certifications, and just really focusing on getting our education solid. And so after that mission was over, I immediately started getting calls from contract companies, and so I left South Carolina, which is where I was based out of at the time, and moved to Maryland, and started working as a contractor, doing endpoint countermeasure stuff, risk assessments, and compliance checks, and
Nice.
that's where and of course still doing the National Guard thing on the side, and uh, mission after mission after mission, and contract after contract after contract. I've kind of I've become a bit of a jack of all trades. I've dipped my toes in a lot of different uh, realms in the cybersecurity arena. But I've just I just like learning, and that's kind of that's the underlying. To answer your the initial question, the answer you asked me. I just really like learning, and anytime there's a field or a topic that challenges me, I dive in, both feet first, and it's just, thankfully, this is a field where that well never runs dry.
It's funny. It's fun. It's talking to people that get into cybersecurity too. It's like it's one thing that everyone has to emphasize. Like, hey, look, like this is going to be a field where you're constantly having to read up on new exploits, read up on new tools. Like, there's no it's not like I can't think of a good analogy. Like, I don't want to say plumbing or like electrician because things are still changing, but there's still like a decent baseline where everything's the same. Once you learn that trait, like, hey, everything, water still goes through the pipes. You still have to have certain faucets. Things have to get tightened. You know how to
Yeah.
usually find a fix. Like, usually it's, oh, this is happening. This is the problem. Where with IT, there could be, hey, today is this issue that you've seen before, but then tomorrow is something you've never seen before. You have to do research, figure out what's going on, use a new tool.
Yeah.
Something that's completely different from what you did yesterday than today. So, no, and that's actually perfect because it pulls into our second question for what does your typical day look like in your role, and what are some of the most challenging aspects of your job in cybersecurity?
Well, okay, so obviously, and you being a reservist as well can kind of relate to this. You have your civilian responsibilities and your military responsibilities, and if you're lucky, you get to, when you straddle that line, there's some overlap. So I'll
Yep.
start with my civilian job. So I work for the headquarters, Department of the Army, G6. I work directly for the Chief Information Security Officer, um, for a smaller division of G6, and we manage a very specific subset of networks for the Army's networks. And so I have found myself, we deal more as I've progressed, and it was a very fast progression because usually that comes later in the career, where I'm dealing more with high level policy.
Mm,
I write a lot of memos. I address a lot of policy, procedure, and regulation that the Army puts out for IT and cybersecurity.
okay.
And so usually my boss is like, "Hey, this just came out. I need you to analyze it, make sure that there aren't going to be any issues." I interface with a lot of engineers, the real technical guys, the guys that have, that are the technical subject matter experts, and make sure that, oh, this policy came out requiring this, that, or the other, and we make sure that there aren't going to be any technical roadblocks,
Yeah.
that it's easy to parse for different organizations. We spend a lot of time in NIST pubs, for I'm sure a lot of your listeners probably are familiar with NIST and the security controls. We do a lot of security control implementation auditing.
Okay.
I get to travel. I get to travel a lot. It's not a weekly thing. Maybe, if we're lucky, once a month, but some of the places we get to go are pretty cool. We get to
Nice.
go on site and do compliance auditing, sit down, have interviews with the IT team and the CISO and the information security managers, figure out, okay, well, you check your documentation, maybe occasionally we'll actually get to do some technical stuff, get on keyboard and do some vulnerability scans and make sure that everything is checking out and documentation lines up with the network as is. But not as technical as my job used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But policy is important,
Yes.
documentation is important, and so
It's an it's
so
an
everybody
under
out there listening.
it's an underrated job where when people say like, I want to get into cybersecurity, I'm like, first off, like there's like so many different paths. But the one path I will
Yeah.
look at people and say, hey, look, like have you thought about getting into audit and compliance? Because there is dull and kind of
Yeah.
I'll say dull, but like importance of it as it is, the understanding of NIST, compliance, auditing, the rules, things that you have to have in order for a business to run or an organization is so important because if any of those things are not to par, it can completely shut down or completely pretty much, hey, look, like you guys cannot operate until X happens because you are failing to meet this
Yeah.
said requirement. Or you get a fat fine sent to your organization saying that you owe X amount of dollars until you are able to meet compliance.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point when you say that, because when I first got into it, it was very exciting because the very assertive part of my personality is like, oh, I love telling people where they're wrong and screwing up and how they need to fix it. That's easy. But there are parts that are dull. Yes. If you can develop a I don't want to say an intimate understanding of the policies that you are enforcing, but a little bit better than a basic rudimentary understanding, then it can be a very rewarding, um, at least very challenging role.
Yeah.
But it's very, and this to the point that you made, because of the way we sometimes have to interface with offices, it can be very thankless. Oftentimes you can be looked at as the bad guy because policy can interfere with operations when you're having to, rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, to make something work.
Yep.
And an engineer wants to just make it work. A compliance auditor or a compliance analyst or an engineer wants to make it work as intended. And so those things, sometimes it takes some effort and some heartache to marry those ideas up.
Yep. 100%.
So,
100%. Well, that
so
actually,
anyway, I went off on a tangent. Sorry.
yeah. No, but that's actually perfect. 'Cause it kind of bleeds into our kind of next question, though. For someone looking to get in a career for cybersecurity in 2024, what skills and qualifications would you recommend they kind of focus on in acquiring?
Oh man, that is a loaded question. Um, it depends. I have a unique perspective because of the way I came into the field. Um, if cybersecurity as a whole interests you, um, just starting out, and I'm sure that there are some people that would roll over in their graves if they heard me say this. Sometimes you just kind of have to take the proverbial dart, throw it at the board, and see where it lands. Because you even said it yourself earlier in the conversation that there are so many different sub disciplines in the field
Yep.
that there's no way you could know which one is going to be the right fit for you. Um, I mean, I've known people that got into it by saying, "Hey, this is a field that I could potentially be interested in. I'm going to go drop a little money on a baseline certification. CompTIA's got some great certifications.
Yep.
ISC Squared's got some great certifications, and of course, I am not being monetized when I say this, but I'm a huge shill for this company. SANS has some of the best technical training I've ever had.
Yep.
Um, I am a SANS certified cybersecurity professional, and I'm willing to talk about that till the cows come home. But yeah, so certifications are a great way to start. I mean, obviously, you don't want to go for the high dollar ones because you might find that this is not the field for you, or you may have picked the wrong sub discipline.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
we've
certifications are
made
great.
we've made headway on some of my earlier videos too, which I know you're recently getting to see some of my channel stuff. But like, ideally, I hit exactly that. Like, SANS is like the high tier college level, like Harvard level, like certifications. Then you have like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
CompTIA levels, which I kind of now equivalent. It's now like equivalent, I'd say, like to maybe community college, like universities, just sort of at your state.
yeah,
And then you have
yeah.
like your third party ones, like you have like try hack me stuff, hack the box, the Coursera certifications that they're not what's the word I'm looking for? They're not observed like across like as like professional certs, but
Yeah.
they're still good certs to have saying, hey, look, I have a good understanding of this, or I've completed this, and I've done these rooms and
Yeah,
completed this. So,
yeah,
and
and
they can
the
be somewhat more
stuff like
affordable. But yeah, go ahead, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of really good free resources out there. If you're not sure that you want to spend the money on doing it, and there's a lot of things that even I won't call it a low bar for entry, but they are a reasonable bar for entry versus jumping into stuff that is going to be using a vernacular that is going to go over the average entry level guy's head,
Yeah,
or person's head. Um, So yeah, certs are great. And you said it, hack the box, try hack me. Especially if you're interested in the pen testing side. Though I will caveat here, regardless of which side of the house you're interested in, defensive incident response or pen testing and red teaming, um, knowing the other side is only going to make you better at your job.
100%.
I stand by that. To the day I die. That is, if you want to be a better pen tester, learn the defensive side, because then you learn about all the things you can exploit.
Yep.
You start thinking like the guys that you're working against, and vice versa. The other one too is, and this is something that I do, especially even now, because there's still, as much as I've learned and as much knowledge as I've gained in certain areas, there's still a lot of areas that I feel like such a noob at, and I hate that feeling. Hate that noobish feeling. So I spend a lot of time on YouTube.
Hmm.
I'll just and some and if it's not something that I'm specifically trying to uh, educate myself on, sometimes I will just like, I do a lot of audiobooks, and of course it's all like, hardcore science fiction and fantasy stuff normally. But if I need a break from that, I'll throw on YouTube, and while I'm driving, because I spend a lot of time on the road driving to and from work, or traveling to offsite locations.
Yeah.
Um, and I just pick a topic. I'll just find a topic that maybe a hot button topic for the day, and I'll just throw on. And there's a few professional, really good, and I wish I'd written them down, because I don't keep track of the names of the channels that I listen to. They're all saved on my YouTube account. Um, but and a one that's really good, that's especially if you're going the certification route, Professor Messer has some great lessons. He does occasional Q&As,
Yeah.
for the cert,
I've seen
and,
those.
and those are really good.
What we'll do is I'll make sure I get
Um,
that. I'll snag that list from you after the fact, and I can just throw it
yeah,
on the channel
absolutely.
too. That way, because yeah, I'm all for it, and it's. I think what do you say? You made a good point of it. It's like, what do you want to do? It's like throwing. I like you're throwing a dart into the oasis. Like, I'm just gonna see what is hit on, and it's just like, whether that's compliance,
Yeah,
whether that's audit, whether that's DevOps, whether that's compliance. There's so many different paths, and it's difficult when people say, "Oh yeah, I want to get into cyber and break into it," and but then my next follow up usually is, "Well, what do you want to do?" And it's just like you said, like
yeah,
I made a late career change as well, kind of later in my years, and I did a career. I was 7 years in with a law enforcement agency back in Arizona, and I wanted to change
yeah,
careers. And so it's like the same thing. Like you were able to kind of use your military experience and kind of get back into the military to help leverage the military to get you where you wanted to go. But it's that same thing. Like, well, I was really good at what I did here, but now I have this new interest that I kind of want to maybe make a career. And you had to kind of find that
yeah,
new way to pivot and kind of get into it. And sometimes I tell people they just need to make the jump and kind of take that chance and just kind of dive in and just try it, get into
yeah,
something, understand that there's going to be different things you got to get used to. You're no longer, if you were the guy on this new job or the job you're at, you're now moving to a new job where you may be the new guy, no longer the guy. And there's a whole kind of like
100%.
change you have to kind of get used to of not being the go-to person anymore. You need to make sure you're a little bit more humble, ask questions. I mean, 100%. Yep.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far off the question, because I know that there's still a lot of stuff that we want to talk about. But one of the things there that you said, like moving from job, and you went from like an in the know guy to a not in the know guy, in this field. And maybe you've experienced, we may have talked about this in our conversations in the past, is the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And that's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And there was a brief period where I was like, if I hear someone use that term one more time, my head's going to explode. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, that's absolutely true. And there's nothing wrong with imposter syndrome as long as you let it push you to be better. But that is something that I want all young professionals, and even people who've been in the field as long as we've been in the field and longer, is that you cannot, under any circumstance, unless you are literally a superhuman being, know everything about everything. You can barely know everything about one thing. And so, if you can accept that, then it really frees you up to be as good as you can be
Yep.
in whatever field you decide to be in.
It's funny. One of my managers had a good quote, and I've used it on a few of my channels in these talks. It's like, if you're really good at what you do, your next job will find you. And it goes into that aspect too of, like you said, just like being willing to learn, being able to absorb things. And I think we had that. I think it was either yesterday or today we were talking about it, when it's like, you're looking at that statistic where it's like, supposedly, if like you're not good at recognizing you're good at something, like you're not good at. I mean, you can rephrase it better than I can, but it's kind of
Yeah,
like cyber though, and I'll let you kind of say it, and then I'll
yeah,
get to where I want to try to get to.
yeah, yeah. So, and for all the listeners out there, I am not saying that I ascribe to this principle. It's just an interesting thought experiment that I heard on some social video that was posted on like Facebook or something yesterday or the day before. And the guy said that the skill set required to be good at a thing, and I hope I'm phrasing this right, is the same exact skill set needed to recognize if you are or are not good at said thing. And I was like, interesting, because there are a lot of outlying use cases in that thought process. But
And
I was like, it's
yeah,
interesting. So I'm a guitarist, and it took me a long time before I felt like I was a really good guitarist. And then I look back at the years of like in middle school and high school where I thought I was going to be the next Chris Cornell, Eddie Van Halen. I thought I had arrived, and then I actually developed my skill, got a degree in it, and was like, wow, you thought you were amazing, and you were awful. And so that's kind of forced it. Is like I wasn't good enough to recognize that I wasn't good. But then I got good and realized, well, I'm not good. So it's this weird thing. But the underlying, I think the spirit of it is that the more you know, the less you realize you know.
yeah, and I think where I was getting at to it is like that imposter syndrome, right? So it's like, you don't think you're
Hmm.
good at something, or like you maybe make a mistake on a case, you investigate something, and it ended up being a different outcome, and you're like, oh man, like, am I good at this? Am I really doing a good job? But then like that same thing comes around, like you either help like another analyst or an engineer with it, or like, oh yeah, remember that, this is what you need to do, and they're like, oh man, I
Yeah,
wouldn't have known that without your help, thanks. And it's just like, you have the good days and the
yeah,
bad days, maybe, I think is maybe what I'm trying to get out of it too. So it's like, yeah, making those jumps and like doing this change and breaking into cyber is, it's not an easy process. And it's just like, same thing, it took me about a year and some change to make my jump from law enforcement into IT. And it's like, you're doing a career change, you're changing jobs, might be moving cities, states, completely different organizations. It's, in a sense, you're
yeah,
starting a brand new job from day one. And yeah, it's definitely nerve wracking. And it's like, yeah, that same thing of whether recognizing you're good at something or that imposter syndrome kicks in. As long as you're willing to learn and understand and like make mistakes, correct yourself off those mistakes so you try not to make them again, and then just continuously grow and ask questions. This is something that anyone can get into if you have the right amount of time, heart, and just willpower to kind of get into and really
yeah.
learn. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And if I don't want to belabor this particular question, but if I could add one other thing to
yeah,
that.
please.
Um, so back when I was crewing helicopters, I had a flight instructor who uh, a lot of what I learned about teaching, I learned from him. And one of the things that he taught me, and this may seem, when I say it, it may come out and be like, oh, well, that's an obvious elementary concept, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that is, you never learn from the things you do right and exceptionally well. You learn more from the mistakes that you make, from the uh-ohs in your job, than you
Yep.
do from the things that get you attaboys. And so he was always, and he was very. I always felt like, was a younger soldier, I was like, you're really hard on me. Why do you ride me so hard? And then when I came up and I came into my own as a flight engineer, it was like, oh, I remember this and this. I know not to do this, and it was because he really enforced. making sure I learn from those lessons. And to this day, he's one of my best friends, and I owe him a lot about how I approach teaching and encouraging people to lean into the mistakes and not don't dwell on them, but embrace the fact that that's gonna make you a better
Yeah.
whatever you are.
Well, that's actually
So anyway, sorry, that was
that's actually perfect. 'Cause that bleeds into our final and our last question actually perfectly is who are your role models in
that wasn't
cybersecurity
scripted.
or the questions just blend so well. It's perfectly made is what it is. Who are your role models in cybersecurity industry or any related fields, and how have they
Yeah.
influenced your approach in your career?
Okay. Um. Ooh. So I've got a couple. I'll start with the ones that are role models in the field, and then there's one that I will talk about that's outside of the field. So the two biggest ones that have probably had the most influence on my um, progression in my field, not just in the larger scope of the field, but specifically in this field, is my old sergeant major. He's actually my old first sergeant, Tim Larkin. He's a Sans GSE that holds like two masters in different cybersecurity disciplines. The guy's just a walking encyclopedia of experience and knowledge, and he's the one that really pushed me out of my comfort zone to really dive into some technical aspects of the field.
Okay.
I back in 20 late 2020, I did a job change in the military before, obviously before going to the warrant officer route. Um, but there's a job in the signal realm of the Army called 25 Delta. It's cyber network defense. It's
Mhm.
a lot of incident response, digital forensics, incident handling, and some pen testing. I didn't. He basically said, I would really like for you to go to this course. It's a very challenging course. I've been to it. It's probably one of the hardest courses the Army offers at the time. I think that may have shifted to a different course now, but he really pushed me to go there, and I had never experienced imposter syndrome like I did going to that course, and I ended up graduating top of my class and came out of it with a lot of credentials and certifications, and more confident in my ability than I ever had. And to this day, like because he's moved on, he's a sergeant major elsewhere now, but we still chat every once in a while, and we talk a lot about the aspects of professionalism and mentorship in the field, which I think is something that is critical to success in our field is mentorship and finding someone that or someone's that can do it. So Tim Larkin, and then Robbie Brown. He's my branch manager. He's the one that kind of pushed me to go the warrant route. He's working on becoming a Sans GSE, and as far as technical stuff, the guy's he's been there, done that. I mean, I don't think there's anything that guy can't do. He's been on the defensive side, the offensive side. One of my closest friends to this day. Turns out, and we didn't know at the time. I didn't meet him till later in life, but we actually ran in some of the same circles in high school and just never crossed paths. And so, just two guys that have really pushed me in both my military career and my just general cybersecurity professional field. So those are the two big ones. And then Jeff Kimbrell, who was the flight instructor that I talked about earlier, that was really, really, pushed me really hard. And John Zimmerman was his counterpart. They were both Chinook guys, and they taught me pretty much everything I know about education. And
Nice.
and I'm a big, used to be a music teacher, so education's really important to me. And in being able to impart wisdom, mentorship, um, you know, and honestly, that's kind of what led me to be a warrant officer. Is we're advisors, we're mentors, and that's what I'm good at. And if you don't know the answer, you don't. If someone asks you a question, you don't have to know the answer. You just have to know
Yep.
where to find it.
Correct.
And they all taught me that. Leverage the assets around you.
No, man, that's awesome and that's great advice. I do have a spin off random question I ask everybody toward the
Hmm.
end of
Yeah.
our show. and that is, what have you
Yeah.
been doing for fun, or any video games burning the midnight oil? So anything kind of, most IT folks I've realized are nerds. Praise the nerds, D&D. But yeah, man, anything that's been burning the midnight oil for any good games lately?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's causing me lack of sleep. So if you see me in class with my eyes drooping, it's because I've been staying up too late playing uh, video games. So I'm a big tabletop gamer, and I want to qualify that. Not nothing against the Warhammer crew and war games, but I grew up. I've been playing. I'm 44. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was 11. Um, and shameless plug. Paizo's Pathfinder and Starfinder are the way to go. I got a couple weekly games that I play there. I know you're a 5e guy, sorry.
I
Uh,
am. I am.
and and then nothing wrong with that. I like 5e too. BG3, obviously, probably one of the best modern video games to come out in recent memory, to my knowledge, especially if you like the solo RPGs. It's
Yep.
a phenomenal game. Larian did a great job, and Final Fantasy 14 and World of Warcraft's new expansion are just. I was really impressed with what Blizzard did after a couple of, I don't want to say subpar, but not really my jam as far as MMOs go.
Yeah.
But yeah, um, and then embarrassingly, I still get stuck on stupid mobile games that I can't put down for hours. And it's like, oh, I was supposed to meet them for lunch 2 hours ago, but I'm still playing this mobile game. So yeah, anything I get my hands on that's electronic entertainment, I love it, man.
Nice, man. Well, hey, Lucas, that is it. And everyone that's been staying around for these videos and sticking it to the end, really appreciate you guys' time. Lucas, any final words for anyone trying to get into and breaking into cybersecurity? I know that right now the market's pretty hard still. We're in quarter, I think, just starting quarter four. So I think most organizations, whether they're starting to hire for their end of year or waiting for quarter one, obviously it's a mix. You see the layoffs, you see the mass hirings, you have the shadow jobs now. They're now starting to get posted off organizations. Any advice for folks trying to get in or kind of break into cyber to get their career started and kind of get this going?
Yeah, just do it. Just do it. If it's on your radar, you, waiting for the right time is like, I don't even have an analogy for it. If you wait for the right time, you're going to be waiting until you're not breathing. You just have to just jump in and see if it sticks. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Or if you've got some tenacity, take a step back, dry off, jump in the pool again. Something's going to stick.
Yep.
It's a career field it's not going anywhere. Especially now that we have that AI has become such a prevalent thing in the forefront of the cultural mindset. There's new technologies constantly. We use the cloud every day. The average user is probably going to have touched it intentionally or otherwise AI. Read about it, learn about it, and then start developing that expertise, because you won't be an expert overnight. You got to start somewhere. So just do it.
Awesome, Lucas. Well, hey, thanks so much for the words of wisdom. Hey, everyone, thanks so much for sticking around. Stay tuned. We have some other great interviews coming down the pipeline here in the next few months. And Lucas, once again, thank you so much. Lucky you.
Thanks, Andrew.
I'll be sending you the cool link to my swag shop to choose your poison of what you'd like to get for a huge thank you for coming onto the channel. And yeah, everyone, keep hacking.